Accept her, or get out of my house. That was what Dante Moretti said to his pregnant wife. Not whispered, not in a moment of weakness, said clearly, coldly. While standing in his own kitchen, the same kitchen where Amara had cooked his mother's recipes for 8 years, where she had held his hand after funerals and sat with him through the worst nights his empire had ever seen. 6 months pregnant, her back aching, her ankles swollen, and the most powerful criminal in Chicago was standing 3 feet away from her, telling her to share him. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She looked at him for a long moment, really looked, and then she walked to the bedroom, pulled out the suitcase she had packed that morning, and came back through the hallway without looking at the photographs on the wall. The door closed behind her with barely a sound. If that had been you carrying his child, wearing his ring, having given him 8 years of your life, what would you have done? If you've ever loved someone who confused loyalty with ownership, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel and follow Amara's story all the way to the end, because what she does next will shock you. Hit like and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The October rain had been falling since early morning, the kind of rain that doesn't announce itself, just arrives and settles in, gray and patient, like it owns the city. Amara Moretti stood at the kitchen window of their Lakeshore Drive mansion, watching it bead against the glass, one hand resting against her belly, where her daughter had been kicking since 6A. She was 32 years old. She had been married to Dante Moretti for 8 years. She managed 3 of his legitimate holding companies, handled a team of 12 accountants, could read a balance sheet the way most people read a menu, and still found herself standing at that window with a hollow feeling in her chest that she couldn't quite name and had stopped trying to. She told herself it was pregnancy hormones. She told herself that a lot. Dante came downstairs at 7:45. He was already dressed gray suit, no tie, the kind of casual expensive that men like him had worn so long it looked like their natural skin. He kissed her temple, the way you kiss a relative at a holiday gathering, warm enough, deliberate enough, telling you nothing at all. I'll be back Sunday, he said, opening the refrigerator. Same as always. Same as always, Amara repeated. He glanced at her. You okay? My back hurts. You should rest more. He pulled out a bottle of water, twisted the cap. I'll have Rosa check on you. Rosa was their housekeeper. Not his answer to an aching back. Not really. I don't need Rosa, Amara said. I need you to answer your phone when I call. He set the bottle down on the counter and looked at her with an expression she had learned to read over 8 years, not anger exactly, but the thing that lived right beside it. Patience performing itself. Amara, last year I called 4 times. You picked up once. The connection was bad. I was in a meeting. For 4 days. That's how these things work. He picked up the water again. You know that. She did know that. She had known it for years. She had accepted it for years. The same way she had accepted the security detail that followed her to prenatal appointments. The blocked contacts on his phone. He never tried to hide because he knew she wouldn't ask. The dinners where she sat beside men whose names she wasn't supposed to remember, smiling at appropriate moments, laughing softly, being decorative without being dim. She had been very good at all of it. Which hotel? She asked. He didn't hesitate, the Alderton. Same as always. He kissed her forehead that time. Longer than the temple, meant to be reassuring. She noticed he did it with his eyes open. After he was gone, Amara sat at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold, and her laptop open to a tab she hadn't meant to leave up. The Alderton Hotel, Chicago. It was a fine hotel. Good restaurant. Kind of place that didn't ask questions. She had called it 2 weeks ago. Not to make a reservation. Just to ask whether the private meeting rooms on the 4th floor were available for a small gathering the 3rd weekend of October. The woman on the phone had been pleasant. There were no private meeting rooms on the 4th floor. There hadn't been a private event booking under the Moretti name in the past 2 years. Amara had thanked her, closed the browser tab, sat very still for a long time. Then she'd opened it again. She wasn't a woman who made decisions in a rush. That had been true before Dante, and it was true now. She had grown up watching her mother make fast, reactive choices in relationships, in finances, in arguments, and she had watched what those fast choices cost her. So Amara had learned to be deliberate, careful. She moved through the world the way she read contracts, slowly, starting at the fine print. So she didn't call Dante that day. She didn't confront him. She waited. She thought. And she quietly started paying attention to details she had trained herself over 8 years not to examine too closely. She remembered his January conference in Miami. She had seen the hotel confirmation herself. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, and she'd picked it up without thinking, the way you pick up a piece of mail. But now she tried to remember, had she ever seen the confirmation for the October trip? For any of the October trips? She hadn't. She had heard about them. He'd always told her. He'd always said the same hotel, the same gathering, the same story, a private meeting with certain associates. Old ties, nothing she needed to know about. And she had believed him not because she was naive, but because she had been choosing to believe him, which is a different thing entirely. And she knew that now. The baby kicked again. "I know," Amara said quietly to her belly. "I know." She opened a new tab and started looking at shell companies registered in Cook County in the last 4 years, because she was a woman who managed legitimate corporate structures for a living, and she knew where to look when something smelled wrong. She didn't follow him on Thursday. She was going to, and then she didn't, because her back was genuinely bad, and she had a 10 a.m. call with the CFO of the restaurant group she managed, and she told herself she needed more information before she did anything that couldn't be undone. She was very good at telling herself useful things. But Friday morning, she was outside the private terminal at midway before 7 a.m., sitting in a dark rental car she'd paid cash for, wearing a coat she hadn't worn in years because it wasn't something Dante's security team would recognize. She had parked where the camera angles were weak. She knew where they were because she had once helped redesign the property's security layout when Dante had needed a favor from the terminal's owner. She had been useful to him in so many ways. She was going to be useful to herself now. At 7:23, his armored SUV pulled in. She watched him step out. He was in the dark coat, the one he wore when he wasn't trying to look like anything in particular, when he was just moving through the world as himself, without the performance. He had a rolling suitcase, a carry bag over one shoulder. He paused on the tarmac and said something into his phone, and then he walked toward a waiting black car, not one she recognized. Not one of his regular drivers. Car window came down, and Amara saw her. She was younger. Not dramatically, maybe. 26, 27. Light-skinned, dark hair pulled back. The kind of woman who looked polished at 7 in the morning without it appearing like work. She leaned out the window slightly and said something to Dante that made him laugh, not the social laugh he used at dinners, but the real one, the one that reached his eyes. Amara had not seen that laugh in longer than she could track. He got in the passenger seat. The car drove off the tarmac in a direction that wasn't toward a terminal gate. Amara sat very still. Her hands were in her lap. The rental car was cold. She had been a fool, she thought. Not for loving him, she wasn't going to punish herself for that. But for the years she'd spent telling herself that the distance between them was about his world, his pressure, his history. The weight of the things men like him carried. She had made herself into the understanding wife, the steady one, the one who didn't push, didn't demand, didn't create problems he'd have to manage on top of everything else. She had managed herself right out of her own marriage. She gave them a full 4 minutes before she followed. The townhouse was on a residential street on the north side, quiet, tree-lined, the kind of block where everything was expensive, but nothing announced it. Iron gates, a stone path. Flowers in the window boxes that had been planted by someone who cared about them. Amara parked half a block away. She watched the woman from the car unlock the front door, not fumbling for keys, not checking an address. Opening the door the way you open a door you've opened 1,000 times before. Dante carried his suitcase in. She raised her phone before she had consciously decided to. She photographed the door, the address, the gate, his silhouette in the doorway. Then she waited, because she was the kind of woman who waited, who didn't react until she had what she needed. The curtain on the first-floor window wasn't fully closed. Through that gap, she saw Dante put his bag down on what looked like a bench near the door, the kind of bench you put in an entryway because you live there, because you need somewhere to sit and take off your shoes. He said something. The woman laughed and turned toward him, and Dante Moretti, who had not touched his pregnant wife with anything resembling tenderness in months, pulled this woman into his arms with the ease of someone touching a person he touched all the time. Not a quick embrace, not a greeting. The kind of holding that was its own sentence. Amara photographed that too. Then she sat back in the seat and looked at her phone screen, at the image she had just taken, and thought, so this is what it looks like. She had half expected to cry. She didn't. She sat there on that street and felt tum-zump settle. In her, not peace exactly, but clarity, which is sometimes what you get when the last uncertainty burns off, and you can finally see the whole shape of what you've been living inside. Her daughter kicked. "We're okay," Amara said. "We're going to be okay." She started the car and drove back to the mansion, and she was home in time to have breakfast. And when Rosa asked how she was feeling, she said, "Better than yesterday," which was true in the way that true things sometimes are when they contain everything and nothing at once. She spent the weekend working. Not the legitimate company work, though she did that too, because she was not a woman who let things fall apart around her when she was falling apart herself. But she also spent Saturday night at her dining room table with a glass of water and her laptop and every piece of financial documentation she had access to, which was more than Dante probably remembered. The shell company appeared in county filings as something called Harbor Meridian LLC. It owned the townhouse. It had been capitalized through a series of transfers from a consulting firm that was itself owned by a second company, and that second company had a registered agent whose name Amara recognized because she had once notarized a document for him as a favor. She had been useful to his secrets, too, without knowing it. Harbor Meridian had been registered 4.5 years ago. Amara had gotten pregnant 3 months ago. She read that date 3 times. She had wondered in her worst private moments if she had changed during the pregnancy. Dante's mother, Marcella, had certainly implied it enough times that Amara was more anxious now, more difficult, that she should try to be easier on Dante given everything he was carrying. Amara had taken it. She had taken it the way she had been taking things for years, swallowing the edges off her own feelings so that everything in the Moretti household could remain smooth. 4.5 years ago, before the pregnancy, before the distance she had been blaming on the pregnancy, before the conversation she had started then stopped because she had decided she was being too sensitive. She had not been too sensitive. She had been right. And the woman who had helped her be wrong about being right was Dante's mother, who had known. Amara felt that land in her chest like something dropped from a great height. Marcella had known. All those comments about how Amara needed to be more accommodating, more patient, less emotional, it hadn't been the cruelty of a difficult mother-in-law. It had been a deliberate effort to keep Amara looking inward for the source of problems that were not her fault. She closed the laptop. She sat in the silent dining room of the house that was worth more than most city blocks in this city, and she thought about this city, and she thought of who she had been 8 years ago when she'd met Dante at a charity gala, 24 years old and certain of herself in the way you can only be when you haven't been tested yet. She had known what he was. She hadn't lied to herself about that. She had believed, because he had made her believe, that what existed between them was something that operated by different rules than the rest of his world, that she was the exception to everything. She had been right that she was different. She had been wrong about what kind of different. Sunday afternoon, Dante came home. She heard the front door, heard his keys on the table by the entrance, heard him move through the house, the way he always did, not heavy, not nervous, but with the particular ease of a man who has never once walked into a room and worried about his welcome. She was in the sitting room off the kitchen. She had a book open in her lap that she had not been reading. "Hey," he said from the doorway. "Hey, how's your back?" "Better." He came in and sat across from her, in the chair that was his chair, because he had chosen it once and never stopped choosing it. He looked tired, but not guilty. That was the thing about men like Dante. Guilt looked different on them. Or maybe it didn't look like anything at all. He had too much practice. "Good weekend?" she asked. "Productive." He rolled his neck slightly. "Same people, same conversations. You know how it is." "Aldrin comfortable?" "Always is." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "You want me to order dinner?" he asked. "I already ate," she said. "But order what you want." He nodded and pulled out his phone, and Amara returned to the book she wasn't reading, and the thing between them, that hollow, careful, pretending to be fine thing, settled back into its usual shape, and nothing in Dante's expression suggested he had any idea that his wife had sat outside a townhouse on the north side on Friday morning and photographed him walking into the home of a woman he had been supporting in secret for 4.5 years. He had no idea. That was the thing she kept coming back to in the days that followed. Not just the betrayal itself, which was devastating, which she wasn't pretending wasn't, but the fact that he didn't know she knew. He had looked her in the face over dinner 3 nights in a row and lied to her without any apparent effort. He thought she was waiting. He thought she was trusting. He thought she was, in some essential way, manageable. And in that misjudgment, in that comfortable, practiced certainty that Amara would stay within the lines he had drawn, was the first mistake he had made that she could actually use. She called an attorney Monday morning. Not a divorce attorney. Not yet. A corporate attorney she had worked with for years, on the legitimate side of Dante's businesses, a woman named Sheila Graves who was smart, careful, and who Amara had reason to believe had her own complicated feelings about the way certain men operated in this city. "I need to ask you something hypothetically," Amara said. "Of course," Sheila said. If a spouse, the spouse who manages the legitimate corporate holdings, had reason to believe that some of those holdings were being used to support a personal arrangement that the other spouse wasn't aware of, what would the process look like for separating the assets that belong clearly to the managing spouse? A long pause. "That would depend," Sheila said carefully, "on how the holdings are structured and whether there's documentation." "There's documentation," Amara said. Another pause. "Amara," Sheila said, "I think we should schedule a meeting." Not a phone call. "I think so too," Amara said. "Thursday?" "Thursday," Sheila confirmed. And Amara, "Come alone." After she hung up, Amara sat for a moment in the small office she kept on the second floor of her office, with her files and her books and her framed photograph of her own mother on the windowsill, and she put her hand on her belly and just breathed. The baby was still. "We're doing this right," Amara told her. "No shortcuts. No mistakes. We're going to do this so carefully that when it's done completely." The morning light came through the window and landed across the floor, and outside, Chicago continued to be Chicago complicated and indifferent, and full of people making the hardest decisions of their lives. Amara picked up a pen. She started making a list. The list Amara started that Monday morning was not a list of grievances. She had enough of those. She didn't need to write them down. What she wrote were numbers, account numbers, filing dates, registration codes, transfer amounts. Kind of information that didn't care about anyone's feelings and couldn't be argued with in a room full of lawyers. She wrote in the small, neat hand she'd developed over years of annotating financial documents, precise, legible, the handwriting of a woman who knew that clarity was its own form of power. She filled 4 pages before the baby kicked hard enough to make her stop and breathe. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I hear you." She capped the pen and sat back. Her lower back had been a consistent complaint since month 5, and the wooden desk chair wasn't helping. She pressed her palm flat against the side of her belly where the kick had landed and waited to feel another one. Nothing. Just the ordinary heaviness of 6 months along, the weight she carried now in every direction, not just forward. She thought about the Thursday meeting with Sheila. Then she thought about what she still didn't know. She knew about the townhouse. She knew about Harbor Meridian LLC. She knew the woman's face, and the way Dante had held her, and the date on the shell company registration that made all of Marcella's careful insinuations collapse into something much uglier than a mother-in-law's cruelty. But she didn't know the woman's name. She didn't know how deep this went, whether it was one secret or a system of them, whether the money she had been managing in good faith was clean, or whether her own signatures was somewhere on documents that benefited a life she'd never been told about. That last possibility was the one that kept her awake. Because if her name was on anything connected to Harbor Meridian, if her professional signature had been used even indirectly, even unwittingly, to legitimize whatever structure Dante had built around this woman, then she wasn't just a betrayed wife. She was a liability, and she needed to know that before she walked into Sheila Graves's office on Thursday, because she was not going to sit across from a lawyer and be surprised. She had been surprised enough. She pulled the laptop back toward her and started working. Not frantically, she was too tired for frantic and too deliberate for it anyway, methodically, page by page, filing by filing. By midnight, she had found the woman's name. Selena Ward, listed as operations coordinator for a restaurant consulting subsidiary that Amara had been managing the parent company of for 3 years, a position that had been created 18 months ago. A salary that was generous but not conspicuous, exactly, in the range that wouldn't require explanation. Amara sat with that for a long moment. She had signed payroll authorizations that included Selena Ward's name. She had done it without thinking, because why would she have thought to look? Because there were 42 names on those payroll lists, and she had trusted the structure her husband had handed her and done the work she was given to do. She closed the laptop. She didn't sleep well that night. Not because she was crying she wasn't, or not much, but because her mind kept running the same loop without arriving anywhere new, the way her mind had always operated under stress, efficiently, relentlessly, and without mercy. Tuesday morning, Amara Moretti arrived without calling. She never called. She was 71 years old, had survived 2 husbands and 1 federal investigation, and had decided somewhere around her 60th birthday that the world ought to organize itself around her presence rather than the other way around. She let herself in with the key Dante had given her years ago and came down the hall calling Amara's name in the particular tone she used when she wanted to seem cheerful and be the opposite. Amara heard her from the kitchen and stayed exactly where she was. There you are. Marcella came in and looked at Amara's breakfast, half a piece of toast, a glass of orange juice, a prenatal vitamin she hadn't taken yet, with the expression of a woman who has strong opinions about everything and restrains roughly none of them. You're not eating enough. Good morning, Marcella. Sit, sit, sit. I'll make something. She was already moving toward the refrigerator. You look pale. Are you sleeping? I'm fine. You don't look fine. She pulled eggs out, then closed the refrigerator and turned to look at Amara directly. Dante called me. He said you seemed distant when he got home Sunday. Amara picked up the vitamin, put it in her mouth, took a sip of juice. Did he, she said. He worries about you. You know how he is. He doesn't say it, but he carries it. Marcella cracked an egg against the pan with the efficiency of someone who has made this argument many times and considers it settled. Pregnancy is hard. It changes a woman's chemistry. My doctor told me with Dante's older brother, I became a different person in the 3rd trimester. Convinced myself of all kinds of things. What kind of things? Oh, you know, suspicions, worries. She waved the spatula slightly. The mind looks for problems when the body is under stress. Natural. But you have to be careful not to let it damage something good. Amara looked at her mother-in-law's back, at the way she stood at that stove comfortable, unhurried, as if she owned this kitchen the same way. She assumed she owned every room she walked into. And Amara thought she knows. She has known for a long time. Every comment she has ever made about Amara, being too emotional, too suspicious, too inward, all of it had a purpose. Not carelessness, architecture. Marcella had been building a framework for Amara to live inside, one that ensured that when Amara felt something was wrong, she would conclude the problem was herself. It was in its way impressive. Amara was not impressed. Do you know a woman named Selena Ward? Amara asked. The spatula kept moving. The eggs kept cooking, 1 beat, 2, maybe half a second longer than silence should last. It's between 2 people who have nothing to hide from each other. I don't think so, Marcella said. Should I? She works for one of Dante's companies, Amara said. I was just curious if the name came up. I don't keep track of his employees. She slid the eggs onto a plate and set it in front of Amara with the practiced warmth of a woman performing care. Eat. You need protein. Amara looked at the eggs. Then she looked up at Marcella. Thank you, she said. For breakfast. Marcella patted her shoulder. That's what family is for. She stayed another 40 minutes, talking about the baby's nursery and a cousin's upcoming anniversary, and a restaurant she thought they should all try in the new year. She was charming and specific, and Amara watched her the entire time with new eyes really watched her, and understood that she was sitting across from a woman who was very good at the same thing Dante was good at, which was making you feel like the most important person in the room while giving you precisely none of what you actually needed. After Marcella left, Amara sat at the table for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and texted Sheila, "Can we move Thursday to tomorrow? Something has changed." Sheila replied within 4 minutes, "I'll clear my afternoon, 2 o'clock." The meeting with Sheila lasted 3 hours. Amara brought the list. She brought the photographs from her phone, which she'd had printed at a drugstore 2 neighborhoods away. She brought the corporate filings she'd pulled from public records. She brought the payroll authorization sheets she'd found in her own files, the ones with her signature on them, the ones that included Selena Ward's name. Sheila sat across from her and read everything without speaking. She was a small, precise woman in her early 50s who wore reading glasses on a chain and had the particular stillness of someone who had heard terrible things from the mouths of composed people many times and had made a professional peace with it. She read for almost 40 minutes while Amara sat across from her and drank water and said nothing, because Sheila had asked her not to summarize, not to contextualize, just to let the document speak. When Sheila finished, she took off her reading glasses and set them on the table and said, "Your name is on those payroll sheets." "I know," Amara said. "That complicates some things." "I know that too. Tell me what it doesn't complicate." Sheila looked at her for a moment. "You understand that if this becomes adversarial, your husband has resources that—" "I know what my husband has," Amara said quietly. "Tell me what I have." That was when the real meeting began. What Amara had, it turned out, was more than she'd thought and less than she needed, which is usually how it goes. 3 of the legitimate holding companies were structured in a way that gave her specific documented authority, not just management responsibility, but actual ownership stake. Kind her attorney had helped her establish years ago at Dante's direction, likely because it provided certain tax advantages and certainly not because he had been thinking about what would happen if his wife ever needed to use it against him. She had controlling interest in 2 of those companies, partial interest in a third. Harbor Meridian was untouchable. From her side, it was too buried, too separated from anything with her name on it. But the money that had flowed through the structures she managed, the money that had funded the subsidiary that employed Selena Ward, there were irregularities there. Sheila was careful about the word she used. Not fraud, not theft. Irregularities. The kind that a good forensic accountant could trace, Amara said. Kind that a good forensic accountant could spend considerable time tracing, Sheila agreed. "I want to separate what's mine before anything else moves," Amara said. "The companies, the accounts I have authority over. I want to understand exactly what I control and how quickly I can make that unambiguous." "You're not ready to file?" "Not yet. I need more of the picture. And I need everything in order before he knows I'm looking." Sheila wrote something on her notepad. "This needs to be fast then. If he finds out you've seen the corporate filings, the timeline changes." "He won't find out," Amara said. "He doesn't think I'm the kind of person who does this." Sheila looked at her over the legal pad. "No offense," she said, "but most people who end up in my office aren't the kind of person who does this either, until they are." Amara didn't argue with that. She was in the car on the way home when her phone rang. Dante's name on the screen. She let it ring twice, composed her voice not in a dramatic way, just the small interior reset she had been doing her whole life, the one that put the manageable face over whatever was actually happening behind it, and answered. "Hey," she said, "hey." He sounded like himself, relaxed, unbothered. "Where are you?" "Running errands. My back was bad this morning, so I got out of the house." "Good. You should move around more." A pause. "My mother called. She said you seem tired." "Your mother came by without calling, which is why I seem tired." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. "She means well." "I know she does," Amara said, "because that was the thing you said." "I'm going to be late tonight. Meeting with Richie." Richie was his consigliere, an older man, long in the organization, whose silences said more than most people's speeches. "Okay," she said, "don't wait up." "I won't." After she hung up, she drove 2 more blocks and then pulled over because her hands were doing something. She needed to stop not shaking exactly. But that held. Effortful stillness that was the physical counterpart of not shaking. She put the car in park and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and just sat there watching people walk past on the sidewalk. A woman with a stroller, an older man with a small dog, 2 teenagers with their heads bent over a phone. The ordinary world, going about itself. She thought about Richie, about the fact that if Dante was meeting with Richie tonight, it meant something was being managed. Something needed organizing, needed a plan, needed the particular steady voice of an older man who had seen enough to stay calm through almost anything. She thought about what that might be about. She thought, he doesn't know. If he knew, this conversation would have been different. She was right about that. for now. Dante came home after midnight. She heard him downstairs. The pattern of his movements had been part of her sleep cycle for 8 years, so she heard without quite waking, just registered home, quiet, going to the kitchen, now the stairs. Kept her eyes closed and her breathing even, and he came into the room and stopped for a moment in the way he sometimes did, which she had once thought was him watching her, and had been moved by, and now she lay still and thought, what is he actually thinking in those moments? She would probably never know. He got into bed without touching her. She listened to him fall asleep. Thursday she received an email. It came to her personal account, not the one connected to Dante's businesses, the private Gmails she had kept since college, and which she had never given to anyone in his organization. The sender was an address she didn't recognize. The subject line said, "You should know who she is." She almost deleted it. She opened it instead. Inside was a document. 12 pages. It detailed Selena Ward's employment history, not just at Dante's restaurant's subsidiary, but at 2 previous companies connected to his organization going back 6 years. Timeline. Performance reviews that had nothing to do with performance. A salary trajectory that made no sense for the stated role. Photographs not of anything intimate, just of Selena at company events, company dinners, places and occasions where she had been positioned as a legitimate professional presence. At the bottom of the document, in a section labeled simply additional, a photograph of a building Amara recognized. The Moretti organization's primary commercial real estate office on Michigan Avenue, and Selena Ward standing in the lobby with a key card in her hand. Not a visitor key card, the kind with a photo on it, the kind they gave people who worked there. Amara went through the document 3 times. Then she sat back and thought about who had sent it. Someone inside the organization who knew about Selena. Someone who knew Amara's private email address, which was a shorter list, and a list she didn't like the implications of. Someone who had decided, for reasons of their own, that Amara should have this information. That could mean someone protecting her. It could mean someone positioning her. In Dante's world, the two were rarely separate. She forwarded the document to Sheila. Then she printed it and added it to her folder. The folder was getting thick. Friday evening, Marcella called. Not texted, called, which meant she wanted to hear Amara's voice, which meant she was checking something. "I've been thinking about what we talked about Tuesday," Marcella said. "Have you? I want you to know that Dante is a complicated man. His father was complicated. These are men who have certain." She paused and chose the word the way you choose a piece of fruit in a store carefully, looking for one that didn't show the wrong things on its surface. Arrangements. That the women in their lives learn to accept. Not easy. "I know it's not easy." Amara said nothing. "But the marriage," Marcella continued. "The family that's permanent. That's real. The other things are not permanent. They never are." "What other things, Marcella?" A pause. "I'm speaking generally. You've never spoken generally in your life." The silence on the phone had a different quality than conversational silence. It was the silence of a woman recalibrating. "I'm trying to help you," Marcella said finally. Her voice had shifted, not warmer, but more direct. The performance of warmth had briefly stopped. "There are ways to handle situations like this that protect everyone, including you, including the baby. If you start making noise, is that a threat? It's a reality." Her voice was steady. "Not unkind, absolutely not kind either. You have a good life. Dante provides. The child will want for nothing. There are women who have navigated this and come out with everything intact. I was one of them." There it was. Amara sat with that sentence for a moment. I was one of them. 71 years old, 2 dead husbands, a house full of photographs of a family she had kept together by teaching herself not to see certain things. She had survived by becoming the architecture herself, by making sure everyone around her accepted what she had accepted, so she wouldn't have to stand alone inside that acceptance. "Thank you for calling," Amara said. "Amara, I have to go. The baby's been active tonight. I need to rest." She hung up. She didn't put the phone down. She opened her contacts and found a number she had memorized but never called, and had never quite deleted either, a woman named Petra, who had worked adjacent to Dante's world for years, who existed in that gray professional space that surrounded the organization without being of it, and who had once told Amara, at a dinner party 4 years ago, "If you ever need to move money quietly and legally, call me, because there are 3 ways to do it, and 2 of them will destroy you." Amara had laughed at the time. She called Petra now. The phone rang 4 times. I wasn't sure you'd ever use this number, Petra said without surprise. Neither was I, Amara said. I need advice about the 2 ways that don't destroy you. When tomorrow? Fine, Petra said, breakfast. I'll text you the place. She met Petra at a diner on the west side that served the kind of breakfast that didn't care about aesthetics, big portions, strong coffee, the sound of other people's conversations providing natural cover. Petra was 55, Russian-born, with the kind of economical elegance that came from knowing exactly what she was worth and not decorating it unnecessarily. She drank her coffee black and listened to Amara talk for 20 minutes without interrupting. When Amara finished, Petra put her cup down and said, How much time do you have before he notices? I don't know. Maybe weeks. Maybe less. The payroll signatures are the problem. I know. If his people go looking, they'll use those to argue you were complicit. I know that too. So you need documentation showing you had no knowledge of her role or the purpose of the position. Petra turned her coffee cup in her hands, thinking, which means a paper trail that predates any potential legal action. Correspondence, internal memos, requests for organizational charts that you can show you never received fully. Things that establish you asked reasonable questions and were given incomplete information. Can that be created retroactively? Petra looked at her. I'm going to pretend you didn't ask that. Right, Amara said. Okay, what else? The companies where you have documented authority, those need to be separated cleanly and fast. Not dramatically. Quietly. Restructuring can be done in ways that look routine. The kind of thing a managing partner might do, in preparation for a maternity leave, for example. Updating ownership documentation. Clarifying lines of authority. That's legitimate. Completely, Petra said. And if anyone asks, you were planning for the baby. They sat with that for a moment. I need to ask you something, Amara said. Then ask it. Did you send me a document this week? 12 pages. About Selena Ward. Petra's expression didn't change in any of the ways a guilty expression changes. But her eyes moved, just slightly, to a point above Amara's left shoulder, and then back. Someone inside the organization wants this to surface, Amara said. Whether it's you or not, that's what's happening. And I need to know if I'm being used. Everyone in that world uses everyone, Petra said calmly. Question is whether being used in this particular direction hurts you or helps you. That depends on why. Yes, Petra agreed. It does. She picked up her coffee again. Tell you this. There are people inside Dante's organization who have their own reasons for wanting certain structures visible right now. It has nothing to do with you personally. But your situation, your leverage, your access to those companies makes you a useful vehicle for a much larger set of interests. Meaning someone wants me to file. Meaning someone wants the financial irregularities to become legally visible. A divorce filing would accomplish that. She set down the cup. That doesn't mean you shouldn't file. It just means you should understand that you won't be alone in the room, even when you think you are. Amara sat with that for longer than she sat with most things. Then she said, I don't care about their reasons. I care about my daughter. Good, Petra said. Then we understand each other. She drove home from that breakfast a different person than the one who had made the list on Monday morning. Not angrier, not more afraid. Something had clarified below the level of emotion, the way a sky clarifies after a storm, not because the storm was over, but because she could see the full shape of what the storm was. She had walked into a marriage knowing certain things and deciding to believe in certain other things, and now the believing part was over, and what was left was just the knowing. She knew what Dante had done. She knew what Marcella had enabled. She knew that Selena Ward had been part of her husband's life for each 6 years, had been present at events Amara had attended, had possibly been in rooms Amara had stood in without knowing what she was standing next to. She knew her own signature was on papers she hadn't understood the full purpose of. She knew all of it, and she was still here, still walking, still breathing, still carrying her daughter through all of it. She parked the car in the garage and sat for a moment before going inside. That was when she heard it from the open window above the garage, sound traveling down through the old building's bones, the way sound sometimes did in houses that were too big and too quiet. Dante's voice, lower than usual, with that particular compressed air quality he used when he was trying not to be loud and couldn't quite manage it. Keep Selena's name clean. My wife doesn't know anything. And another voice, slower, older Richie. For how long? Long enough. After the baby comes, the situation will be easier to manage. Amara sat in the car. She did not move for a full 60 seconds. She was not surprised. That was the thing, she was not surprised, which was its own kind of terrible, because it meant she had already suspected this, had been living alongside this suspicion for longer than she had admitted to herself. He was not just betraying her. He was planning around her. He had a timeline, a management strategy. She was a variable in a plan she had not been told about, and the plan involved waiting until her defenses were lowest, until she was postpartum, exhausted, hormonally wrecked, and holding a newborn to continue whatever it was he intended to continue. After the baby comes, the situation will be easier to manage. The situation. She got out of the car. She walked into the house through the side door and upstairs, without stopping in the kitchen, without saying hello, without doing any of the ordinary things that would tell him she was home. She went directly to her office and closed the door and sat down at her desk. Picked up her phone. She called Sheila. I need to accelerate the timeline, she said when Sheila answered. How fast? Fast, Amara said. And I need everything documented before he has any idea I'm moving. Once he knows, once he figures it out, the window closes. Amara. Sheila's voice was careful. Once we start this process formally, there's no quiet way to undo it. You understand that? I understand that, Amara said. Are you sure? She looked at the photograph of her mother on the windowsill. A woman who had made fast choices. A woman who had paid for them. She was not going to make fast choices. She was going to make the right ones, in the right order, at the pace they required. But she was going to make them. I'm sure, she said. Outside the office door, she heard Dante's footsteps on the stairs, measured, unhurried. The walk of a man who had never once worried about what was waiting on the other side of a door in his own house. He knocked twice and opened it without waiting. Hey, he said. Didn't know you were home. How was your morning? Amara looked up from her desk. Fine, she said. Just some paperwork I needed to catch up on. He glanced at the desk, her legal pad, her pen, the folder she had not had time to put away. His eyes moved across them, the way eyes move across familiar scenery, registering without examining. Come down when you're done, he said. I'll make lunch. Okay, she said. He pulled the door closed behind him. Amara sat perfectly still, her hand resting flat on the closed folder, and listened to his footsteps move back down the hall. The folder held everything, and he had looked right at it. The lunch he made was pasta, simple the way he sometimes cooked when he was in a certain kind of mood, the mood that Amara had once loved in him, the one that surfaced when the weight of everything he carried briefly lifted. And he became, for an hour or two, just a man in a kitchen. He was good at it. He had learned from his grandmother, and the actual cooking, the salt timing, the way he tasted as he went. The patience with the sauce was one of the few things about him that had never felt performed. She sat at the kitchen island and watched him and thought, this is still real. Pasta is still real. That doesn't mean anything. You've been quiet, he said, not turning from the stove. I'm tired. You should tell Sheila's office to push the quarterly review. You don't need that pressure right now. She looked at the back of his head. I didn't tell you I had a meeting with Sheila. He turned slightly, stirring. You mentioned it last week. Tuesday, I think. She had not mentioned it last week. She had not mentioned Sheila at all. Right, she said. He set down the spoon and turned to look at her fully, and for a moment she had the sensation she sometimes got in the early years of their marriage, that he was reading her, that he saw more than he acknowledged, that the careful, relaxed exterior was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was make you forget how much was operating underneath it. You okay? He asked. My back, she said. Third time this week she'd used the back. She needed to retire it soon. He nodded and turned back to the stove. She ate the pasta. It was good. She hated that it was good. After lunch he went to his study, and she went upstairs, and the house held them both in its expensive silence, the way it always had. And nothing about that afternoon would have looked unusual to anyone watching, which was exactly what she needed. Saturday morning, she told him she was going to visit her college friend Denise in Evanston, which was true. Denise existed, lived in Evanston, and had been texting Amara for weeks, asking when she could see the belly. Amara had not responded to those texts yet. She was going to use them now. She texted Denise. Can I come today? I need to get out of the house. Denise replied in 40 seconds. Yes, get here now. I will make waffles. She told Dante at 10. He was in the kitchen with his coffee and his phone, and he looked up and said, take someone with you, meaning one of the security detail. And she said, it's Denise, Dante. I'm not taking a bodyguard to Evanston. And he did the thing he always did when she pushed back on security, a small compression of his jaw, not quite a flinch. That meant he wanted to argue and had decided it wasn't worth it. Text me when you're there, he said. I will. She drove herself. She had been driving herself more in the past 2 weeks than in the past 2 years, and no one had commented on it yet, though she suspected Dante had noticed and filed it somewhere. He filed everything. That was who he was. She texted him from Denise's driveway. Then she sat with Denise for 2 hours and ate half a waffle and let Denise put both hands on her belly and feel the baby kick, and she listened to Denise talk about her own divorce. 3 years ago, a clean one. Relatively speaking, no criminal organization involved, just 2 people who had wanted different things and finally admitted it, and she thought about what clean meant and whether she would ever be able to use that word for what was coming. She didn't tell Denise anything specific. She said she was going through some things with Dante. Denise, who had met Dante twice and had been politely terrified of him both times, said, "Is he, are you safe?" "Yes," Amara said. And then, because Denise deserved honesty, "I'm being careful." Denise held her hand for a moment. Didn't push. That was the thing about women who had been through their own worst year. They knew the shape of a secret, and they knew when not to put their hands on it. Amara drove home feeling, briefly, like herself. The self that existed before the Moretti name, before the mansion, before the careful performance of being exactly the right kind of woman for exactly the wrong kind of man. She was in the Qasar 3 blocks from home when her phone rang. The number was Sheila's office. "This is Amara." "It's Marcus." Marcus was Sheila's associate, younger, meticulous. He had been helping her with the document review. "I need you to come in Monday morning. First thing." "What happened?" A brief pause, the kind that meant something had been found, and he was deciding how much to say over the phone. "We were going through the corporate structure of the third holding company," he said. "The one where you have partial interest. Meridian Capital Holdings." "Yes, we found something." Another pause. "There's a document in the file dated 11 months ago. It's a restructuring memorandum. It reallocates your ownership percentage from 22% to 8%. She felt something cold move through her chest. "That would require my signature," she said. "It has your signature." She pulled over. She sat with the engine running and the heat on and looked at a mailbox on the sidewalk, read ordinary, the kind of thing you look at when you need something solid and uncomplicated to focus on. "That's not my signature," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "Compared it to 12 other documents you signed in the same month. The variance is small, but it's there. Whoever did this was careful." "How much does 8% change what I control?" "It changes everything," he said. "At 22%, with the provisions in the original partnership agreement, you have blocking rights on major decisions. At 8%, you're essentially advisory." "When was this filed?" 11 months ago. 11 months ago, she had been in the 2nd trimester. She had been dealing with morning sickness, Marcella's weekly visits, and a complicated month in the restaurant group's finances. She had been distracted. She could see it now with the particular clarity of someone looking backward at something they should have caught. She had been managed, kept occupied with enough legitimate work that she wouldn't have the bandwidth to look at everything. "Monday," she said. "First thing." "There's something else." She waited. "The document was notarized," Marcus said. "The notary stamp is from a firm on Michigan Avenue. I ran the notary registration number." He stopped. "Amara, the registered notary, is a man named Giordano. He's Marcella Moretti's personal attorney." She sat in that car for 11 minutes. She counted them because her mind needed something to count. Marcella's attorney had notarized a document with a forged version of Amara's signature 11 months ago, when she had been pregnant and occupied and carefully not looking at certain things, because Marcella had spent months building the architecture that made her not look. This was not a husband who had a mistress. This was a coordinated stripping of her legals inside her own marriage. She thought about the Tuesday breakfast. Marcella at the stove, making eggs, talking about pregnancy hormones, and suspicious minds. She thought about every comment over the past year, the ones about Amara being too emotional, too inward, too difficult. She had been wearing those comments like they were her own conclusions. They weren't. They had been planted. She drove home. She did not go inside immediately. She sat in the garage and breathed in the way the prenatal instructor had taught her, slow, deliberate, filling the bottom of her lungs first. She did this 4 times. Her hands were steady by the time she opened the car door. Dante was in the study when she got inside. She could hear him on the phone. She went upstairs, changed out of her coat, washed her face, and stood at the bathroom mirror for a moment, looking at herself. 32 years old, 6 months pregnant, living in a house where her signature had been forged and her legal rights had been quietly carved away, while she managed spreadsheets as attended dinners and tried to be the kind of wife who didn't create problems. She looked herself directly in the eyes and said, very quietly, "Stop being careful. Be strategic." Those were different things, she had realized. Careful meant protecting yourself from harm. Strategic meant deciding what outcome you were working toward and moving every piece on the board toward it, including pieces you didn't know you had yet. She dried her face and went back downstairs. Sunday morning, she asked Dante to go with her to the prenatal appointment she had rescheduled for that week. He said yes, which surprised her. And then she remembered that of course it didn't. He wanted to believe things were normal between them. Wanted the version of Amara who was tired and a little distant, but ultimately here, ultimately his, ultimately waiting. Saying yes to a prenatal appointment was easy. It cost him nothing. It made him feel like a participating husband. He sat in the appointment beside her and asked the right questions and held her hand when the doctor used the Doppler, and they heard the heartbeat, strong and fast, 154 beats per minute, filling the small room. And Amara watched his face when he heard it. Whatever else he was, whatever he had done and arranged and forged and hidden, he was affected by that sound in a way that was real. She filed that away too, not for sympathy, as information. On the way home, he was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that meant something had landed in him. She let it sit. "I've been thinking," he said, when they were 2 blocks from the house. "About what?" "About when she comes. The baby." He kept his eyes on the road. "I want to be around more. I know the last few months haven't been easy." "No," she agreed. "They haven't. That's going to change." She looked at his profile. The jaw she had kissed 1,000 times. The hands on the wheel that were capable of terrible things, and had also once held her through the worst night of her life when her mother had been in the hospital, and had been certain she was going to say, "How?" she asked. He glanced at her. "What do you mean, how? I mean, what's going to change and how?" Specifically, small beat. He wasn't used to being asked to be specific. He was used to announcing intentions and having them received with relief. "I'll be home more," he said. "Delegate more to Richie." "Okay," she said. She didn't say, "There's a document with a forged version of my signature reducing my ownership in the company I've spent 3 years managing, and it was notarized by your mother's attorney." She didn't say, "I know about Selena Ward's keycard to your Michigan Avenue office." She didn't say, "I know you have a plan for managing the situation after the baby comes, and the situation is me." She said, "Okay." And he pulled into the garage with the expression of a man who believed things were moving the direction he wanted them to move. Monday morning, she was in Sheila's office at 8:15. Marcus had the document spread across the conference table, alongside 12 originals, the authentic comparisons. He was right. The variance was small. The pen pressure was slightly off on the upstroke of the A in her first name, and the second loop in the double R of Moretti was marginally wider than her consistent pattern. Whoever had done it had practiced, had done it carefully, had done it with someone who understood document forensics well enough to know what to replicate, and well enough, almost, to replicate it perfectly. Almost. Sheila sat across from her. "We need to talk about what this means for the filing strategy. Tell me, if we file now, before we have the forgery documented and verified by an independent forensic expert, Dante's attorneys will move to have your ownership claims disputed immediately. The forged document is in the official record. Until we have the expert opinion in writing, it's your word against a notarized filing. How long for the forensic expert? If I call in a favor, 8 days. More realistically, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Amara said. I know. Can he move the assets in 2 weeks? Sheila and Marcus exchanged a look. If he realizes we're documenting the forgery, yes. Amara pressed her hands flat on the table. How would he realize that? Someone in this office would have to tell him, Sheila said. Or someone would have to notice that you've pulled certain documents from the system. Have I pulled them? Officially? Marcus accessed them through the management account you have authorized access to, Sheila said. So technically, no. You haven't done anything outside your authority. Then we wait 8 days, Amara said. And no one outside this room knows we found the discrepancy. Sheila nodded. There's one more thing we found. Marcus slid another document across the table. It was a life insurance policy. Amara's name as the insured, Dante as the beneficiary. She knew about this policy. She had signed it 2 years ago without particular concern, because people in marriages had life insurance policies, and it had not seemed like anything other than what it was. But this copy had an annotation she had never seen. In the margin, in a handwriting she didn't recognize, were 2 words and a number, Review Q4. Where did you find this? She said. It was in the same file packet as the restructuring memorandum, Marcus said. We think it was misfiled or deliberately placed. What does Review Q4 mean in this context? Marcus opened his mouth. Sheila put her hand up slightly, a small gesture, a stop. It's one possible interpretation, Sheila said carefully, that someone was flagging the policy for a review of beneficiary terms. Standard practice. What's another possible interpretation? Sheila held her gaze, that someone was tracking the policy's payout timeline against another timeline. The room was very quiet. Amara looked at the document. Then she looked up. I need you to tell me directly, she said, not carefully. Directly. Sheila sat forward slightly. The annotation is in Giordano's handwriting. I've seen his handwriting on other documents. I'm confident. Giordano works for Marcella. This annotation, in the context of the forged restructuring document in the same file packet, and the timing she stopped. Say it, Amara said. In the context of everything we've found, there is a reasonable reading of this annotation that suggests someone connected to the Moretti family was considering the policy's value in the event of your death, not as murder, not explicitly, as a financial planning question. She paused, which in certain contexts amounts to the same thing. Amara sat back in her chair. She put one hand on her belly. The baby moved. She had been afraid before in her life. She had been afraid the night her mother was in the hospital. She had been afraid once in the early years of her marriage, when a situation in Dante's world had gotten close enough to their home that she'd understood, viscerally, what it meant to exist in his orbit. She had been afraid, in smaller ways, more ordinary ways, the ways that accumulate over a lifetime without requiring crisis. This was different from all of them. This was the particular fear that comes when you realize the danger is not in front of you. It has been around you for a long time, and you had been thinking you were standing outside it. Does Dante know about this annotation? She asked. I don't know, Sheila said. The document packet came from Giordano's office, not Dante's. Possible Dante doesn't know this specific document exists. Possible. Yes. But you're not sure. No, Sheila said. I'm not sure. Amara looked at the life insurance policy, at her own name on it, at the 2 words in the margin, written by a man who worked for Dante's mother, in the same file as a forged signature designed to reduce her legal standing in the companies she managed. She thought about Dante's voice through the garage window. After the baby comes, the situation will be easier to manage. She thought about Marcella at the stove, talking about women who navigate difficult situations and come out with everything intact. She thought about the Petra's words, you won't be alone in the room, even when you think you are. She left Sheila's office at 10:45 and sat in her car in the parking structure for 6 minutes. Then she called Petra. I found something, she said when Petra answered. Tell me. She described the annotation, the handwriting, the filing context. The line was quiet for a moment. Where are you? Petra asked. Parking garage on Wacker. Stay there, Petra said. Don't go home yet. I'm going to make a call, and I'll be back to you in 20 minutes. What kind of call? The kind that tells us whether this is Marcella operating alone, Petra said, or whether Dante knows. And if Dante knows? Petra's voice was steady, not warm, but grounded in the particular steadiness of someone who had operated in proximity to dangerous men, long enough to have lost the ability to be shocked. Dante knows, she said. Then you don't go back to that house. Not today. Maybe not at all. Amara sat in the concrete gray of the parking structure and listened to the sound of the city moving around her cars on the ramp above, a door opening and closing somewhere below, the filtered noise of Chicago operating at its usual relentless pitch. Indifferent to the fact that the architecture of Amara's life was dismantling itself in real time. Her phone buzzed. "Dante, where are you?" "Rosa said you left early." She typed back. "Meeting with Sheila ran long. Back soon." She watched the 3 dots that meant he was typing. They appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. "Okay. Drive safe." She put the phone face down on her thigh and stared at the concrete wall in front of her. 20 minutes felt like a calendar. Petra called back at 11:17. "Talk to someone who would know," she said. "Amara. The annotation, Dante doesn't know about it. That's the person's assessment, and I trust it." A pause. "But there's something else." "There's always something else," Amara said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. The policy review notation, it wasn't written recently. It was written approximately 14 months ago. Before the pregnancy, 14 months ago. Which means, Amara said slowly, which means Giordano flagged your insurance policy to Marcella or for Marcella before you were pregnant. Before anyone knew there would be a Boyle factor into the estate. At a time when you were simply Dante's wife, managing his legitimate businesses, with a growing legal ownership stake in structures he might one day want back. The silence stretched. She was thinking about the companies, Amara said, not the baby. This was about the ownership percentages. Companies, the asset structure, the inheritance chain. Petra's voice was careful. Marcellus has spent 50 years managing what belongs to her family. You married into it and started accumulating legitimate legal standing inside it. From her perspective, I was a liability. You were an unknown variable with legal rights that complicated the succession. Amara closed her eyes. She thought about Marcella's hand on her shoulder. That's what family is for. She thought about 8 years of meals and holidays and crises navigated and birthdays remembered, and the particular lonely intimacy of being a daughter-in-law in a family that had never quite made room for her, but had always insisted on her presence. She thought about her daughter, 27 weeks along, not yet born, already tangled in a web that had been building for 14 months, since before she existed, since before Amara knew she was coming, since a man in a Michigan Avenue office had made a notation in the margin of a life insurance policy on behalf of a woman who had stood in Amara's kitchen making eggs and talking about how family navigated difficulty. "I'm not going home tonight," Amara said. "Good," Petra said. "I need you to help me find somewhere." Already thinking about it. "How long do you need?" "Long enough to move what I can move and document what I need to document. And long enough to get an emergency motion filed if Sheila thinks the forgery evidence is strong enough for a judge to freeze the asset transfers. That's 3 to 5 days minimum. Then 3 to 5 days. She paused. "Dante cannot know where I am. He'll start looking." "I know." She opened her eyes. The concrete wall was still there. Same gray. Same indifferent solidity. But looking and finding are different things. And I've been invisible in this marriage for a long time. She started the car. "I'm going to use that." She did not go home. She drove to a hotel in the West Loop, not a name-brand one, not somewhere connected to anyone she knew, and she paid cash at the front desk for 2 nights, because cash was something she had been quietly accumulating for 3 weeks in small enough amounts to avoid triggering the household account notifications Dante's financial team monitored. She had thought of that 3 weeks ago. She had thought of it before she consciously knew she would need it, which meant some part of her had known longer than she was willing to admit. The room was ordinary, clean. The window faced an alley. She set her bag down on the bed and sat beside it, and took her phone out and looked at Dante's last text, "Drive safe." She thought about the man who had said that, the same man who had sat in the doctor's office that morning and heard his daughter's heartbeat, and gone quiet in that real unperformed way. The same man whose voice she had heard through the garage window. The same man who had kissed her forehead at the airport before she watched him drive away with Selena Ward. The same man who had cooked pasta on Saturday because some part of him, still, needed to believe he was a good husband, while being a terrible one. She did not know which of those men was the real one. She suspected they all were. She called Sheila. "I'm not at home," she said. "I need you to file for the emergency motion first thing tomorrow. And I need the forensic examiner contacted tonight." Pause. "Amara, are you? I'm fine. I'm safe. But I need this to move now." No more waiting. No more 8 days. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that, and also aware that pride was a strange thing to feel about your voice not shaking when your life was dismantling around you. Dante has an attorney meeting Wednesday afternoon. I know his schedule. That's our window. By Wednesday evening, I need the motion filed and this asset documentations submitted to the court. That's 48 hours. I know. Amara, if we push this fast and we miss something, we haven't missed anything, she said. We've been meticulous. I've been meticulous for 3 weeks. The documents are clean. The forensic comparison is solid. File it. She paused. And Sheila, the life insurance policy. I want a notation in the filing that there is evidence of estate planning documents prepared on my behalf without my knowledge. Don't say more than that, but I want it on record. Another pause, longer this time. That's a significant statement, Sheila said. I know what it is. It will provoke a strong response. I know that too. Once we do this, Sheila said, and Amara could hear in her voice the weight of someone who understood exactly what she was setting in motion. There's no version of this that stays quiet. He will know. Everything comes into the open. Amara looked at the window, the alley beyond it, the ordinary gray of an ordinary Chicago afternoon that had no idea what was happening inside this hotel room. Then it comes into the open, she said. She hung up. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed in the silence of a room that belonged to no one, carrying a daughter who had not yet been told what world she was being born into. And she stayed there until she was sure not comfortable, not unafraid, but sure. And then she lay back against the pillow and closed her eyes and let herself, but just for a moment, stop managing. The baby kicked once, hard, right below her ribs. I know, Amara said to the ceiling. I know, we're going. She did not sleep well. That was not a surprise. The hotel mattress was fine, neither uncomfortable enough to blame nor comfortable enough to sink into. And she lay on her side the way she had slept for the past 2 months, a pillow wedged behind her lower back, one hand resting against her belly, and she watched the light from the alley move across the ceiling in slow, meaningless patterns while her mind ran its inventory for the 4th time that night. Documents secured, copied, physical copies in Sheila's office, and a second set in a safe deposit box at a bank branch on Milwaukee Avenue that she had opened 6 days ago under her maiden name, which she was still legally entitled to use and which appeared on none of Dante's corporate filings. Money, enough in the account Petra had helped her establish clean, unconnected, funded through 3 weeks of cash withdrawals from the household allowance. Dante had always been generous with, because generosity was something he could afford, and it cost him nothing to sustain herself for. Approximately 4 months without touching anything else. Phone, a prepaid she had bought at a drugstore in Wicker Park, was in her bag for anything she didn't want traced. Her regular phone was on, visible, receiving his texts, because she needed him to believe she was reachable and unremarkable. Sheila had confirmed at 9 p.m. the forensic examiner had agreed to an emergency review. 40 hours, not 48. She was faster than most and owed Sheila a favor that was apparently worth burning on this. At 2 in the morning, Amara got up and sat in the chair by the window and looked at the alley and thought about the version of her life in which none of this had happened. It was a useless thing to think about, and she allowed herself 3 minutes of it, because she was human, and she had loved him, and that was still true. In the faith that things that have been true for a long time remain technically true even after they stop being useful. 3 minutes. Then she went back to bed. Tuesday. She was at Sheila's office by 7:30. Marcus had dark circles and 2 empty coffee cups on his desk, and the focused, slightly hollowed-out expression of someone who had been working since before midnight. Forensic examiner called at 6, he said. She's confident. The signature is forged. She's putting it in writing by noon. Good. She found something else. He pulled a photograph across the desk toward her, a magnified scan of the document's lower margin. There's an indent impression in the paper, the kind you get when you write on a page that's resting on top of the one you're writing on. She was able to recover partial text. Amara looked at the photograph. The impressed text was faint but legible in the enhanced image, after delivery confirm, and then an abbreviation she didn't recognize. 2 letters after delivery confirm, she said. We think it refers to the delivery of the restructuring document to the county filing office, Marcus said. The abbreviation is consistent with a notation system Giordano's office uses. We cross-referenced it with another document that came through Sheila's practice 2 years ago. So someone was confirming that the forged document had been successfully filed. That's our reading. She sat down in the chair across from his desk. The thing about uncovering systematic deception was that you didn't feel it all at once. You felt it in installments, each one arriving before the previous one had fully landed, so that you were always slightly behind your own grief, always catching up to an outrage that had already moved 2 steps further than you expected. It was exhausting in a specific way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Where's Sheila?" she asked. "She's been on the phone since 6:30. Marcus checked his watch. "She has a call with a judge's clerk at 8. She's trying to get us in front of the court today instead of tomorrow." "Today?" "The policy annotation changes the calculus," he said. "Sheila believes a judge will consider it evidence of potential risk to you and the child. That opens the door for emergency relief without the standard waiting period." Amara pressed her hands flat on her thighs. "Dante has a lunch today. His financial team. It runs until at least 2. "I know. Sheila knows. If we can get the filing done and the motion heard before 2, then the first he'll know about any of it is when his attorney calls him," Marcus said. "And his attorney won't call him in the middle of a lunch meeting with his financial team, unless it's serious." "Serious," Amara said. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "It is." At 8:52, Dante texted her. "Morning, how are you feeling? You were gone before I woke up." She was sitting in Sheila's conference room drinking bad coffee and listening to Sheila in the next office, conducting a conversation in the measured, precise tones of someone dismantling an argument brick by brick. She typed back, "Tired but okay. Running some errands. Doctor says movement is good. 3 dots. Good. Come home for dinner? I'll cook." She stared at that. He wanted to cook. He was being the man who cooked pasta, who heard the heartbeat and went quiet, who drove safe, who asked how she was feeling. He was being the husband because husbands were useful to him right now, and he was never unaware of what was useful. She typed, "Maybe. I'll let you know." She put the phone down. Sheila came into the conference room at 9:15. "We're in at 11, she said. "Emergency hearing. Judge Harker. She's dealt with Moretti-adjacent cases before, and she doesn't have patience for procedural games." She sat down across from Amara. "We'll have the forensic opinion by then. The case for freezing the disputed assets is strong. The annotation on the policy is stronger than I expected. Harker is going to ask questions about it." "What kind of questions? Whether you have reason to believe you're in danger?" Amara looked at the wall. "Am I?" Sheila met her eyes. "I don't know. What I know is that there's a document that can be read that way, created by a person connected to your husband's family, and that a court will take it seriously in the context of everything else." She paused. "I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm trying to make sure you understand what gets said in that room and what it sets in motion. What does it set in motion? If Harker grants the emergency motion, the assets get frozen, and Dante's legal team gets notified simultaneously. There's no delay. He'll know within minutes of the ruling." She folded her hands on the table. "And once he knows, once his attorneys start pulling the filing and reading what we've submitted, he'll see the policy annotation argument. He'll know that you believe, or have reason to believe, that someone in his family flagged your insurance for review." A pause. "That's an accusation that changes the nature of this divorce. From infidelity and fraud to something worse. To something that requires an entirely different set of responses from his legal team, and possibly from him personally." Amara picked up the bad coffee. A sip. Set it down. "He won't come after me," she said. "You sound certain of that." "I am." She turned the cup in her hands. "Whatever else he is, and I'm under no illusions about what he is, I'm carrying his daughter. He heard her heartbeat yesterday morning. He wanted to cook dinner tonight." She looked up. "He will be furious. He will fight hard. He will throw every resource he has at this. But he won't come after me physically. That's not who he is. And Marcella, a beat. Marcella," Amara said slowly, "is a different question." The hearing lasted 41 minutes. Judge Harker was in her early 60s, small, with the economical manner of someone who had long ago decided that time was the only resource that couldn't be recovered. She read the submitted documents with her reading glasses, pushed up on her nose, and asked 3 questions precisely. 3, each one targeted like a pin going into an exact point on a map. Then she asked Amara to speak directly for 4 minutes, which Amara did clearly, without crying, in the tone she had developed over years of talking to rooms full of men who needed to believe she was composed. At 11:47, Harker granted the motion. The assets connected to the disputed restructuring document were frozen. A forensic accounting review was ordered. The life insurance policy was flagged for court oversight, pending further review of the annotation evidence. Sheila touched Amara's arm lightly as they left the courtroom. "You did well," she said. "He's going to know," and Amara checked her watch. "How long until his attorneys are notified?" Simultaneously with the filing, which was stamped at 11:49. Sheila looked at her own watch. So about now. Amara's phone rang. Not Dante. She didn't expect Dante at his attorneys would reach him first, would frame it, would tell him to say nothing and do nothing until they had read the full filing. That would take 30 minutes, minimum. The number on her screen was Marcella's. She looked at it. Let it ring. Let it ring again. Sent it to voicemail. They were halfway down the courthouse steps when it rang again. Same number. "She knows," Amara said. "The attorneys would have called Dante," Sheila said. "Dante would have called his mother before calling me," Amara said. "Yes, that's who he is." She put the phone in her bag. She was back at the hotel by 12:30, and she had been sitting on the edge of the bed for 11 minutes when the knock came. Not a hotel knock, tentative, apologetic. This was 3 hard raps, the kind that meant the person on the other side wasn't asking. She didn't move for a moment. Then she went to the door and looked through the peephole. Marcella, in a cream coat, hair set, standing in the hallway of a West Loop hotel with the particular posture of a woman who had decided what this conversation was going to be before she arrived. She looked like she always looked, composed, expensive, absolutely certain of her own authority. Amara unlocked the door and opened it. They looked at each other. "How did you find me?" Amara asked. "I have resources," Marcella said. "Are you going to let me in?" "No." A flicker of something crossed Marcella's face. Not surprised, she had probably expected resistance, but the particular displeasure of someone who has rarely been told no and has never fully built up a tolerance for it. "We need to talk." "We're talking now," Amara said. Marcella glanced down the hallway, then back. "You've made a serious mistake." "Which one?" "Don't be glib." Her voice dropped, not softer, but more compressed. The voice of a woman choosing to be precise. "What you filed this morning has consequences that you don't fully understand. There are people connected to Dante's business who do not respond well to legal actions that put their finances under court scrutiny. This isn't about your marriage anymore." "You forged my signature," Amara said. Marcella's expression did not change, in the ways expressions usually change when someone is caught in a lie. It stayed exactly as it was, which was its own kind of answer. "I managed a situation," she said, "the way I have always managed situations. You were accumulating rights inside structures that have belonged to this family for 30 years. My rights were legally established by a husband who was being generous." She said the word like it tasted wrong. "Dante is sentimental, he always has been. He gives away things without thinking about what it costs the family. Someone has to think about the family." Amara looked at her. At this woman who had sat in her kitchen and made eggs and talked about the chemistry of pregnancy and the wisdom of accepting difficult realities, who had spent months turning Amara's own perceptions against her so that when the walls closed in, Amara would be the one holding the door shut. "The insurance policy," Amara said. "Nothing. Giordano annotated my insurance policy 14 months ago," Amara said, "before the pregnancy. I want you to tell me what that annotation meant." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I manage a great deal of documentation through that office," Marcella said. "I don't recall every notation." "You don't recall," Amara repeated. "No." They stood in the doorway of the ordinary hotel room and looked at each other, and Amara felt something clarify that had been almost clear for 3 weeks. She had been grieving Dante, the Dante she had believed in, the one who had made promises she now understood. He had never intended to keep the way she understood them. But she had been angry at Marcella in a different way. The unfocused anger of someone who has been used without knowing it. The anger that doesn't have clean edges, because you're still not sure exactly what was done. Standing here, looking at the woman's steady, unashamed face, Amara felt the edges sharpen. "I want you to hear what I'm going to say clearly," Amara said. Her voice was quiet, not trembling. Quiet in the way that things get quiet right before they become permanent. I don't know exactly what you intended when that notation was made. Maybe I'll never know. But the court has it now. My attorney has it. And if anything happens to me, if I slip, if I fall, if I have any kind of accident between now and when this case is resolved, the first place anyone will look is that document and your attorney's name on it. Marcella said nothing. I'm not threatening you, Amara said. I'm telling you that the consequences you came here to warn me about work in both directions. Another beat. You're going to regret this, Marcella said. Quiet. Certain, not a threat in the explicit sense. She was too smart for explicit. Just the statement of someone who believed they were always eventually right. Maybe, Amara said. But I'm going to do it anyway. Closed the door. She stood with her back against it and waited to hear the footsteps move away down the hall. They came in their own time, unhurried, deliberate, the walk of a woman who intended to be heard. Then they faded. Amara's hands were shaking now. Not before, not while Marcella was there. Not while she was speaking, but now, with the door closed and the hallway empty. Her hands were doing the thing she had not allowed them to do, and she pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed until it stopped. 4 breaths. 5 Dante called it 217. She had expected it earlier. It meant his attorneys had kept him contained longer than she'd given them credit for, had sat him down and walked him through the filing and made him understand what responding badly would cost him before they let him touch his phone. That was professional. She noted it. She answered. Silence for a moment. Just his breathing. She had heard his breathing in 1,000 contexts, and this one was new, compressed, controlled, the way someone breathes when they have been told very clearly not to say the first thing that comes to mind. Where are you? He said, somewhere safe, Amara. A pause. What did you do? She almost said something sharp. She held it. I protected myself and my daughter, she said. The same way you protect what matters to you. This is, do you understand what you've put into motion? The financial review alone is going to. He stopped. She could hear him stopping, could hear the effort of it. Come home. We can talk about this. We can. You have a forged version of my signature in a county filing, she said, notarized by your mother's attorney. I don't think there's a version of coming home that fixes that. Silence. I didn't know about that, he said. Maybe you didn't. I didn't. Harder now. Amara, I swear. Don't, she said. Don't swear to me. That stopped meaning something. Another silence. Different quality, the kind where someone is absorbing something they didn't expect to have to absorb. Selene said finally. Yes. How long have you known? Long enough. He exhaled. Not quite to sigh, something rougher. I was going to tell you. After the baby, you were going to manage me, she said. After the baby came and I was postpartum and exhausted and had less capacity to fight back. I heard you say it to Ricci. The silence that followed, that was the longest one. She didn't fill it. That was when he started. Don't, she said again. I'm not doing this by phone. My attorney will contact yours. If you want to be part of your daughter's life, and I am not going to prevent that, then you follow the process. You do it legally and cleanly, and you do not contact me through any channel except your attorney and mine. She paused. And Dante, get Giordano's files, all of them. Because there are things in there that I don't think you know about. And you should understand what has been done in the name of protecting your family before you decide who in family deserves your protection. She hung up. Her heart was hitting the inside of her chest with the particular force that comes when adrenaline meets genuine grief. And she sat down on the edge of the bed because her legs felt unreliable, and she put both hands on her belly and breathed. Baby was still. I know, Amara said. I know it's a lot. At 4 o'clock, her regular phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go. Then something made her answer. Mrs. Moretti, a man's voice, older, deliberate. This is Vincent Caruso. I think you know who I am. She did. Vincent Caruso was 73 years old and had spent 40 of those years as the closest thing to a supreme authority that the collection of Chicago crime families had ever accepted. He did not call people. People waited to hear from him. She said nothing. Waiting. I'm calling as a courtesy, Caruso said. What you filed today is your legal right, and I have no interest in your marriage. That's not my business. A pause. But the financial review the court has ordered is going to create visibility into structures that intersect with interests beyond your husband's. I want you to understand that. I understand it, she said. Good. His voice was entirely without heat. It was the voice of weather, not threatening, just describing conditions. I also want you to understand that I have spoken with Dante. He will not be creating problems for you directly. He has been made to understand that creating problems for a pregnant woman would be very bad for his standing. A pause. You should also know that the situation with his mother is being addressed separately. The nature of what she had prepared, without Dante's knowledge or mine, is not something that will be tolerated. Amara sat very still. That's what you called to tell me, she said. Part of it, he breathed. The other part is that I am an old man and I have seen many things, and I have occasionally, when it seems some shewful, been in the business of making certain things very difficult for people who did not deserve to have easy lives. Another pause. You are not one of those people. Conduct your divorce. Protect your child. Do not let this become something larger than it needs to be. And if it does become larger, it won't, he said. Not from our direction. He hung up. She held the phone and looked at the window. Vincent Caruso had called her. Had told her Marcella was being dealt with. Had told her Dante was contained. Had told her, in the particular language of men who ran their world through implication and restraint, that she had more allies in this than she had known, or that she was useful to interests she still didn't fully see. Petra's voice. You won't be alone in the room, even when you think you are. She put the phone down. She stood up, went to the window, looked at the alley. Then she picked up her bag, put on her coat, and texted Sheila. Caruso called me. We need to talk tonight. Sheila replied, in under a minute, I know. My office, 6 o'clock. Don't stop anywhere on the way. She looked at that last line. Don't stop anywhere on the way. Which meant Sheila had also received some information in the last hour. Which meant the circle of people who knew exactly what was in those court filings was widening faster than Amara had planned. Which meant tonight was not the end of anything, it was the moment just before the thing resolved itself into whatever it was going to permanently be. She picked up the prepaid phone, texted Petra, going to Sheila's at 6. Have you heard from anyone? Response came fast, yes. Stay close to Sheila tonight. The Marcella situation is moving faster than expected. What does that mean? 3 minutes passed. Then it means Dante found Giordano's files. Amara stopped moving. She read the text again. Dante found Giordano's files. All of them. The restructuring memorandum. The forged signature. The insurance policy annotation. The notation in the margin written 14 months ago by a man employed by his mother flagging his wife's life insurance for review at a time when the only thing that made financial sense to review it for was the elimination of a variable. Dante had found it. She thought about the compressed breathing on the phone, the controlled fury. He hadn't known about the forgery. She believed that. But she had told him to find Giordano's files, and he had done it. And now he knew not just about Selena and the townhouse in the shell company, not just about Amara's legal filings, but about what his mother had done or had been considering doing, or had commissioned someone to plan for, in the name of protecting the Moretti family from a woman who had married into it and loved it and spent 8 years being managed by it into not seeing what was directly in front of her face. She had told him to look. She had not quite anticipated what it would be like when he found it. Her phone rang. Her regular phone, Dante. She answered it. He said nothing at first, just that breathing again. But different now, the control was still there. But what was underneath it had changed. She could hear it. 8 years of listening to this man, and she could hear the precise difference between Dante furious at her and Dante furious at something else. I read it, he said. I know. My mother, he stopped. Started again. Giordano's files. I read everything. Okay. The annotation. His voice cracked. She had heard Dante Moretti's voice crack twice in 8 years. Amara, I need you to know I did not. I would never. I know, she said. And she did know. Not perfectly, not without doubt, but enough. The annotation had been Marcella's. The forged signature had been Marcella's mechanism. Dante's sin was different. It was the Mistress, the shell company, the years of careful deception, the plan to manage her after the baby came. Those were his. The other thing, the annotation. What it implied, she believed, that was not his. That didn't make his sins smaller. But it mattered, in the specific way that true things matter, even when they don't change the outcome. Where is she? He asked. His voice had gone very flat. I don't know. She called you. She found me at the hotel this afternoon. Silence. You were at a hotel. Yes. Since when? Since I chose not to come home, she said. since I decided I was done waiting for the situation to become easier to manage. He absorbed that. I sent her away, he said. I told her to get out of my house. Told her. He stopped again. She's not welcome near you or the baby. I've made that clear. I heard you, Amara said. I believe you mean it right now. I mean it, he said. The flatness in his voice had something underneath it that she recognized, not grief exactly, because grief was a thing you felt for losses you hadn't caused. Something adjacent to it, the particular weight of a man confronting the cost of what has been built around him. While I was looking elsewhere, Dante, she said. Yeah, my attorney will call yours tomorrow. We need to start the process correctly. The financial review is happening. Regardless, that's the court's order. And there's nothing either of us can do about it. But the divorce itself, how it goes, how long it takes, what your daughter grows up, knowing about how her parents handled the worst year of their lives, that part is up to us. He said nothing. I am not going to make this brutal, she said. I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in protecting my child and having a life I can stand inside. She paused. But I need you to let your attorneys be reasonable. And I need you to be honest with them about everything, including the things that are embarrassing. Because if we go to war, the financial review becomes very public and very ugly. And the people connected to your business who would prefer that not happen are going to be very unhappy with you. You talked to Caruso, he said. He called me. A long pause. He never calls anyone. Dante said, and in his voice, she heard something she had not heard from him in a very long time. The sound of a man in a room he did not know how to leave. No, she agreed, he doesn't. Another silence. The longest one yet. Are you safe? He asked finally. Right now. Is everything okay with the baby? She put her hand on her belly. The baby moved. A slow roll, not a kick. The kind of movement that felt like settling. We're okay, she said. He breathed. Okay, he said. She hung up. She stood in the middle of the hotel room with her coat still on, and her bag over her shoulder, and the prepaid phone in one hand, and the regular phone in the other, and she thought, this is the moment. Not the hearing, not the door closing on Marcella, not the forged signature or the phone call from a 73-year-old man who ran a city in ways that didn't appear in any official record. This moment, her standing here, both phones in her hands, the baby rolling slowly beneath her ribs, the decision already made, and the consequences already in motion, and nothing left to protect except the actual future, the real one, the one that started from here. She put the regular phone in her bag. She put the prepaid phone in her coat pocket, picked up her keys. Sheila's office was 20 minutes away, and the city was doing what the city did, in the early evening cabs and buses, and people with their collars up against the October cold, everyone moving toward wherever they needed to be, the whole enormous ordinary machinery of human life, grinding forward the way it always did, indifferent to the particular crisis of any one person inside it. She walked out of the hotel room. She did not look back at it. She took the stairs instead of the elevator because her body needed to move, needed to feel itself working, and she came out into the lobby and through the front door and into the cold air, and she stood on the sidewalk for just a moment, breathing it in before she started toward the parking structure. Her phone, the regular one, buzzed in her bag. She stopped, pulled it out. A text from a number she had never seen before. No name. 8 words, Giordano is missing. Has been since this morning. She read it once, twice. She looked up at the street. The ordinary evening continued around her, unconcerned. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response came. She stood on the sidewalk, outside the hotel, with October moving through her coat, and the baby still beneath her hands, and the text sitting there on her screen. Those 8 words that changed the shape of everything that was about to happen, and she thought, whatever this is, whatever it means, whatever is moving in the dark right now that she couldn't see, she was not going back inside to wait for it to find her. She put the phone away. She walked to the parking structure. She drove toward Sheila's office through the heart of a city that had never once, in all the years she had lived inside it, stopped to consider what it cost a woman to survive it. And she drove with both hands on the wheel, and her eyes straight ahead, and everything she had, all of it. Every careful, documented piece of the case she had built over 3 weeks, while carrying her daughter through the worst knowledge of her life, riding with her toward whatever came next. Sheila was standing at her office window when Amara arrived. Not sitting. Standing, which was unusual for a woman who conducted most of her professional life from behind a desk with the settled authority of someone who had decided long ago that stillness was its own form of power. She turned when Amara came in, and the look on her face was the look of someone who has received information and has been spending the intervening minutes deciding how to carry it. "Close the door," Sheila said. Amara closed it. "Giordano," she said, before Sheila could begin. Sheila's eyes moved slightly. "You heard I got a text. Unknown number. 8 words. Sit down, Amara. Tell me first." Sheila pressed her lips together briefly. Angelo Giordano was reported missing by his office manager this afternoon. He didn't come in, didn't call. His car was found at O'Hare long-term parking at approximately 2 p.m. She paused. No ticket, no record of him checking in. Passport is gone. Amara sat down, not because Sheila had told her to, because her legs made the decision independently. "He ran," she said. "That's the most likely reading, yes, because Dante found the files. Because someone found the files," Sheila said carefully. "We don't know who moved first. What we know is that by 11 this morning, the forged document and the policy annotation were in a court filing visible to any attorney with access to the case. By noon, Caruso had called you. By 2, Giordano's car was at O'Hare." She sat down across from Amara. "The sequence suggests he knew before Dante did. Someone warned him." "Marcella," Amara said. "Possibly, or someone in Caruso's circle. When a man like Caruso involves himself, information moves in directions you don't always see." Amara sat with this. She thought about Marcella at the hotel doorway that morning. The cream coat, the absolute composure. She had stood there and threatened Amara with consequences, and talked about resources, and then she had gone somewhere. Back to her house on the Gold Coast, Amara had assumed. Back to the life she had spent 50 years constructing and defending. "Where is Marcella?" Amara asked. Sheila's expression shifted in a way that was not quite an answer. "Sheila. She checked into a hotel in Wilmette this afternoon," Sheila said, under her maiden name. "A contact in Caruso's peripheral orbit passed that along to Marcus an hour ago." She paused. "She's not gone. She's waiting." "For what?" "For Dante to decide which direction this goes." Sheila folded her hands. "She's been managing that man since before he could walk. She believes, I think, that if she waits long enough, he'll choose her version of events over yours. That he'll find a way to make this go away for her." "Will he?" Sheila looked at her steadily. "That depends on what Dante found in those files and what he does with it. And that, Amara, is the part I can't control. I can control the court proceedings. I cannot control what happens inside that family tonight." Amara looked at the window behind Sheila's head. The Chicago evening had gone full arc while she was driving over, and the glass held the reflection of the office, the lamp, the bookshelves. Sheila's face, her own, layered over the lights of the street below. She thought about Dante reading Giordano's files. She had told him to look. She had said it on the phone, calm and deliberate, because she had believed it was the right move, had believed that showing him what had been done in the name of protecting his family would shift the balance of the divorce proceedings, would make him less likely to fight her on the asset claims, would make him understand that she was not his enemy. She had not full thought through what it would do to him emotionally, what it would cost him to read those pages and understand that his mother had, at minimum, been planning for a world where his wife was not in it. She had handed him a grenade and told him to look at it carefully. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. Sheila blinked. "Dante?" A pause. "That's not a question I expected." "Neither did I," Amara said. "But I'm asking it." Sheila considered this with the honesty of someone stopped performing certainty about things she wasn't certain about. "I think he's going to be very angry for a very long time," she said. "His mother. At himself. And some of that anger is going to land on this process, even when he intellectually understands that you're not the cause of it." She met Amara's eyes. "That's going to make the next few months hard. Not dangerous." "Hard, I know hard," Amara said. "Yes," Sheila said. "You do." She spent that night at Sheila's guest apartment, a small spare place above the office that Sheila kept for clients who needed somewhere to be that wasn't home and wasn't a hotel. Clean, anonymous, a kitchen with tea and crackers, and a bed with adequate pillows. Amara lay in it and looked at the ceiling and did the thing she had promised herself she would do once. The immediate crisis had passed its sharpest point. She let herself feel it. Not everything, not all at once. She wasn't that kind of person. and she had never pretended to be. But she let herself feel the specific grief of a marriage she had genuinely loved parts of for a long time, with a real person who was also a terrible one. She let herself feel the exhaustion of 3 weeks of meticulous, lonely strategy making while 6 months pregnant, and scared and pretending to her housekeeper and her husband and the man's entire world that she was simply tired and a little distant and fine. She let herself feel the thing she had not let herself feel once. In all those weeks, the pure, ordinary sadness of a woman who had built her adult life inside a relationship and was now going to have to figure out what she was when she stepped outside it. She cried for about 20 minutes. Not dramatically, she was not a dramatic crier, had never been. Just steadily and quietly, the way rain came when it was serious about it. Then she washed her face and drank a glass of water and put her hand on her belly and thought about her daughter's face, which she hadn't seen yet, and thought, she's going to know what her mother did. Not all of it, not when she's small, but eventually. She's going to know that her mother was in an impossible situation and did not wait for someone to rescue her. That was enough. That was actually more than enough. Wednesday morning, Dante's attorneys contacted Sheila. Call lasted 40 minutes. Amara sat in the spare room and read documents and waited, and when Sheila came in, she sat down across from her and said, "He's not contesting the asset separation." Amara looked up. "He's contesting some of the valuations that's routine. His attorneys would do it regardless. But the core claim, your ownership interests, and the petition to have the fraudulently altered document voided, he's not fighting." Sheila set a notepad on the table. "He's also submitted a voluntary statement acknowledging the Selena Ward relationship and the Harbor Meridian structure, and confirming that you had no knowledge of either." That last part was not something she had asked for. She had not asked him to do that. He did that himself, she said. His attorneys say it was his instruction. He told them the statement needed to include that you were not complicit and had no awareness. Sheila paused. "It will help with the payroll signature question." Considerably. Amara set down the document she'd been holding. She thought about who he was. The real, complicated, contradictory person. She had married the one who cooked pasta and heard a heartbeat and went quiet, and also the one who had built a second life behind iron gates on the north side and managed her like a variable in a plan. Both things were true. They would always both be true. The statement his attorneys had just submitted was him being in one specific moment, the version of himself that she had always known existed and had spent years hoping would become the dominant one. It hadn't, but it was there. "Okay," she said. "There's one more thing," Sheila said. "There always is, Marcella." Sheila set down the notepad. "Dante has formally notified her attorney that she is not to have unsupervised contact with you, with the baby, or with any of the proceedings. He's also, and this is not something we expected, he's instructed his own attorneys to cooperate with any investigation into the forged signature and the policy annotation." Amarsa stared at her. "He's cooperating with an investigation into his own mother," she said. "Yes. That's..." She stopped, started again. "What does Marcella's attorney say?" "Nothing yet. Marcella herself has not been formally charged with anything. Forging a signature on a corporate document is a crime, but proving intent and prosecuting it against a woman of her resources is a long process." Sheila looked at her carefully. "You could pursue it. You have grounds. It would be difficult and expensive, and it would keep you connected to this world for another 2 to 3 years through litigation. Or the investigation remains open, on record, available if anything else surfaces, and you focus your energy on the divorce proceedings and your daughter and the rest of your life." She paused. "That's not legal advice. That's human advice. You can tell me to mind my own business." Amara looked at the window of the spare room. A narrow slice of Chicago morning gray sky, the top floor of the building, across the street, a pigeon on a ledge doing what pigeons did. She thought about what pursuing Marcella would cost. Not financially, she had enough. She had protected enough. She would have enough. But in the other currency, the one that didn't appear on balance sheets, the years, the attention, the energy of continuing to be inside this story instead of building a different one. She thought about her daughter. "Leave it open," she said, "on the record, and move forward." Sheila nodded once. "That's what I would do." "I know," Amara said. "That's partly why I said it. The divorce was not quick and it was not clean up, because divorce is From men like Dante Moretti were neither of those things, regardless of how cooperative the parties tried to be. There were valuations disputed and redone. There were motions filed and withdrawn. There were 3 separate instances of Dante's attorneys attempting to renegotiate terms they had already agreed to, which Sheila handled with the patient, precise fury of a woman who had anticipated exactly this and had prepared for it. There were also 2 phone calls from Dante himself that were not routed through attorneys. The first came in November, 3 weeks after she had returned from Sheila's spare room to the temporary apartment. Petra had helped her find a 2-bedroom on the north side, not fancy. Nothing like the Lakeshore Drive mansion, which she had not gone back to except once, with Marcus and a moving company to collect the things that were provably hers. Dante called at 11 at night, and she almost didn't answer, and then she did. "I'm not calling about the case," he said immediately. "Okay." A pause. The longest pause she had heard from him that wasn't strategic. "I wanted to say something. I just wanted to say it to you, and not through 5 attorneys." She waited. "I knew the marriage had problems," he said. "I told myself it was the business, the pressure. I told myself a lot of things." Another pause. None of them were true. "The truth is I was selfish, in a way I didn't examine, because I didn't want to. I built things around me that I wanted, and I convinced myself that keeping you comfortable was the same as keeping you." His voice was flat and careful and entirely without self-pity, which was the only way she could have heard this, without hanging up. It wasn't. "I know that." She sat in the dark of the bedroom of the temporary apartment, one hand on her belly, and listened. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I know where we are. I needed you to know that I know what I did. Not the version my attorneys have decided to know. The actual version." She thought about what to say for a long moment. "I know you know," she said finally. "I've known you for 8 years. I know the difference between when you're performing and when you're not." Silence. "Yeah," he said. "Okay. Good night, Dante." "Good night." She put the phone down and sat in the quiet of her own apartment, her own, rented, temporary, entirely hers, and thought about what it meant to have known someone completely and lost them anyway, and how that was different from every other kind of loss, because you couldn't pretend it was a mystery. She had known him. He had known her, and still. The second call came in January. She had been in labor for 6 hours by then, which she did not tell him when she answered. She told him afterward, which he found out meant she had taken a call from him while actively in labor and had not mentioned it, and she could hear in his voice when he realized this, that it landed as the precise measure of where they stood, not with cruelty, not with intention, just as the simple truth of 2 people who were no longer the first person the other called. She gave birth to a daughter at 4:41 in the morning on a Tuesday in January. The baby saw 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had Dante's dark hair and Amara's wide-set eyes, and the combination of the 2 made her look, in the first minutes of her life, like someone who had already decided to take up a lot of space in the world and was simply waiting for the logistics to catch up. Amara held her and felt the specific rearrangement of priorities that people tried to describe to her before she'd experienced it, and that she now understood could not be described, only undergone. She named her Nora. She had chosen the name alone. No one had been consulted. It was her mother's middle name, a name that had sat quietly in her family's history without making a big deal of itself, the way good names did. Nora Bennett Moretti, both names. She had decided on that too. Not to honor the marriage, but because the child deserved to know where she came from, all of it. And because erasing the Moretti name would have been a kind of pretending that Amara was done with. Dante came to the hospital the following afternoon. Amara had told him the room number herself. She had not set conditions beyond the basic ones. No entourage, no attorneys, no phones out. He came alone. She heard him in the hallway before he appeared in the doorway, recognized the particular rhythm of his footsteps that she had been hearing for 8 years, and would probably be able to identify from 2 rooms away for the rest of her life, whether she wanted to or not. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen on him before. Not the tired of late nights or difficult meetings. The deeper tired, the kind that lived below the surface, and didn't leave when you slept. He stood in the doorway and looked at the bundle in her arms and did not move for a moment. "Come in," she said. He came in. He sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at Nora with an expression that Amara catalogued and then put away, because it was private in a way that deserved to stay private even from her. He sat there for a long time without speaking. "She has your chin," Amara said. "She has your eyes," he said. "I know." He reached out very carefully and touched the back of Nora's hand with one finger. The baby's fingers closed on his with the automatic grip of newborns, the grip that had evolved over however many thousands of years to be impossible to resist. And Dante Moretti sat in a hospital chair and let his daughter hold his finger and didn't say anything for a long time. "She's healthy?" he asked finally. "Perfect," Amara said. 7-2, strong lungs. No complications, he nodded. His jaw was doing the thing, the compression, the control, but not for any of the reasons she had cataloged it before. She had never seen him use that particular effort to hold himself together rather than to hold himself back. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" He looked up at her. "For letting me be here." She held his gaze for a moment. "She's your daughter," she said. "Keeping you from her was never part of this." He looked back at Nora. "I know," he said. "I know that. I'm still thanking you." She let that sit. She thought about all the things she could have said in that moment and didn't. Not because she was being kind, or strategic, or diplomatic, but because some things had already been said, and some things would never be said, and the rest belonged to the future, which was the only place any of them could actually go from here. "The attorneys are close to finishing," she said. "Sheila thinks 2 more weeks. My guys are ready to sign whenever." He paused. "The Harrison Street account, I want you to know that's fully yours." I told them to not argue that one. She hadn't expected him to bring that up here. She nodded. "The restaurant group," she said. "I want to keep managing it, the legitimate side, on a consulting basis, properly contracted. If you're willing?" He looked at her. Surprised, she thought, though he hid it quickly. "You want to keep working for me?" "I want to keep working," she said. "The restaurant group runs well because I've spent 3 years learning it. Walking away from that because of everything else seems like punishing the work for what you did." She met his eyes. "I want a proper contract, independent status, reviewed annually. If either of us decides it's not working, it ends cleanly." He sat with this. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Nora made a small sound, not a cry. Just the half-vocalized shifting of a person readjusting to the fact of being alive in a body, and they both looked at her, and for a moment, the room held something that was not quite peace, but was the closest to the circumstances allowed. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday in March. Amara signed the papers in Sheila's conference room, not dramatically, not with any particular sense of ceremony. She signed them the way she signed Mozart, carefully, without rushing, making sure each page was what it was supposed to be before she put her name to it. Sheila witnessed. Marcus witnessed. Nobody said anything beyond what was required to say. On the way out, Sheila walked her to the elevator and said, "Are you all right?" Amara thought about it honestly. "I'm tired," she said, "and I have a 2-month-old who doesn't sleep in increments longer than 3 hours. But yes, I'm all right." Sheila nodded. "Good." The elevator came. Amara stepped in. "Sheila," she said before the doors closed. Sheila looked at her. "Thank you," Amara said, "for the 40 hours, for the guest apartment, for the human advice." Sheila smiled, a real one, the kind she kept for moments that weren't professional. "You did the hard part," she said. The doors closed. Giordano resurfaced 4 months later in Portugal. The forgery charge had been formally filed. By then Sheila had pursued it after all, on Amara's instruction, though quietly and without the expectation of a dramatic resolution. What Amara had wanted was a record, a permanent, public, findable record that said, "This happened, this man did this. There are consequences for it, even when those consequences arrive slowly." Giordano's attorney negotiated a plea arrangement that did not require his return to the United States and resulted in a fine and a suspended license. It was not satisfying in the way justice in movies was satisfying. It was the version of resolution that the actual world produced when you pushed a stone uphill for months against the resources of powerful people. Amara read the arrangement document on her phone while Nora was asleep in her chest during a walk around the neighborhood. She read it twice. Then she put her phone away and kept walking. Marcella was a different matter. No charges had been filed against Marcella. Policy annotation, without Giordano to testify about its purpose, remained what it technically was, an ambiguous notation in a margin that could be read multiple ways. Amara's attorney had made the case to the court that it constituted evidence of harmful intent. The court had found it concerning enough to warrant the oversight order, and not much else. Dante had cut contact with his mother. That was not something Amara had asked for, and not something she had expected, and it was a consequence. She sat with carefully, not with satisfaction, not with guilt, but with the honest acknowledgement that it was a cost she had not fully priced into her decisions, because the cost was borne by him, not her. She had told him, in the spring, during one of their now regular co-parenting exchanges, in the lobby of her building, "You don't have to never speak to her because of me." He had looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not doing it because of you," he said. "I'm doing it because of what I found in those files." She had nodded. She had not said anything else. Some choices belonged entirely to him. Summer came. Nora learned that hands existed, and that they were both extremely interesting and under her direct control, which she found as astonishing as it apparently warranted. She communicated primarily through expressions a narrow-eyed skepticism that she directed at ceiling fans and strangers, a wide-open delight she reserved for Amara's face, appearing above her after a nap, a look of profound focus when she was engaged with something small and proximate. She was, Amara thought, one of the most specific people she had ever met, and she was 4 months old. Dante came every Sunday, sometimes Saturday too, when the week had been manageable. He came to the apartment, and Amara handed Nora over at the door and went and did things with the 2 hours errands, walking, sitting in a coffee shop with something she was reading, and when she came back the baby was usually either asleep on his chest or conducting one of her focused examinations of his face, which he submitted to with the expression of someone who had been thoroughly understood and had no objection. He always left on time. He always texted when he got home. He had not once, in 4 months, asked about her personal life, or commented on her appearance, or stood too long in the doorway when it was time to go. He was doing, she recognized, the very specific and difficult work of becoming someone who understood what their presence cost someone else and adjusted accordingly. She noted it. She did not reward it. She did not need to. In September, 10 months after she had packed a suitcase and walked out of the Lakeshore Drive mansion with her wedding ring on the dining room table, and her daughter weighing on her from the inside, Amara moved, not far. 40 minutes north of the city, a house with a yard that was not grand and was not a prison and was entirely hers in the name she had chosen to hyphenate, back after the divorce Bennett Moretti, both names. The full complicated record of who she was and where she had been. She had bought it with the money she had protected and the consulting income she had begun drawing, and a small inheritance from her mother's estate that had always been hers and had never, not for a single day, been anyone else's. The yard had a porch. The porch faced east. On the first morning in the new house, she stood on that porch at 6:45, with coffee she had made in her own kitchen, with her own coffee maker, that she had chosen because she liked the way it looked. And she looked at the yard in the early September light. And she thought about the last year in the way you think about something once you're standing on the other side of it. She had not won, exactly. She was not sure winning was the right frame for any of it. She'd lost something a marriage she had genuinely loved the best parts of. A version of the future she had built in her head over 8 years. She had lost months of her pregnancy to fear and strategy, and the particular loneliness of carrying a secret that was actually someone else's secret they had made her carry, without telling her. She had lost the version of herself that believed that if she was good enough, steady enough, competent enough, the people who claimed to love her would protect that love. She had lost that believing. She was not sure she missed it. What she had instead was a house, a yard, a daughter asleep inside who would wake in approximately 40 minutes and require the whole of her mother's attention and would receive it gladly. A career she had rebuilt on her own terms. A legal record that told the truth about what had happened to her, permanently in a file in a courthouse downtown. A phone with the numbers of people, Petra, Denise, her own mother's voice still saved in the contacts, even though the woman was gone. Because some things you kept not because they were useful, but because they were true. She had those things. It was not the same as the life she had planned. It was real in a way the planned life hadn't always been. She heard Nora stir through the baby monitor, clipped to her waistband. A small sound, the waking up inventory every baby ran at the start of consciousness, checking that the world was still approximately the size and shape it had been when they left it. Amara took a last sip of coffee. She went inside. Nora was on her back in the portable crib in the room. That would be her nursery. Once Amara finished painting it, she'd gotten through one wall before the movers arrived and had decided the other three could wait. She was awake, eyes open, doing the ceiling fan examination she brought to every unfamiliar room. "Good morning," Amara said. Nora looked at her mother. That expression, the wide-open one, the one that preceded the noise Nora made when she was genuinely happy, the one that hadn't been performed for anyone and never would be landed in Amara's chest the way it always did, in the place that had been empty and was not empty anymore. She picked up her daughter. Nora grabbed her shirt with both hands and pressed her face against her collar bone and breathed. And Amara stood in the unpainted room of the new house and held her and thought, This is what was worth all of it. Not the winning, not the legal record, not the signed papers and the separated accounts. This specific weight in her arms, this particular breathing person, who had been in the room for every worst moment of the last year, who had been present for all of it inside the only place that had remained entirely safe, and who had arrived into the world anyway, against everything, with all her attention and all her opinions about ceiling fans, and all of her life ahead of her. Amara walked to the window of the unpainted room. She looked out at the yard, at the porch she had stood on 20 minutes ago, at the maple in the corner of the yard that was beginning its slow turn toward October red, unhurried, indifferent to the specific human events it had been a backdrop to before this family and would be a backdrop to long after. She did not think about Dante then. She did not think about Marcella or Giordano or Selena Ward, who had disappeared from every LinkedIn profile and corporate roster in the months since the Financial Review had made Harbor Meridian a matter of public court record. She did not think about the Lake Shore Drive mansion, which she heard, through mutual channels, had been put up for sale in the spring, whether because Dante couldn't stand to stay in it, or because it had become a liability as in some other way. She didn't know, and had decided she didn't need to. She thought about her own mother, a woman who had made fast choices, a woman who had paid for them, who had also, in between the paying and the rushing, raised a daughter who learned to be deliberate, careful, slow to act, and precise when she did, who had given her daughter, without knowing it was a lesson, the specific skill of staying inside an impossible situation long enough to understand it completely before moving. Amara had used that skill. She would use it again. She kissed the top of Nora's head, that particular newborn scalp smell that she had been told would fade and was already fading, and that she was taking in every chance she got, deliberately, the way she did things now. Okay, she said quietly, to her daughter, to the room, to the year that was finally conclusively over, to the next one, which was empty and hers. She shifted Nora to her hip, opened the door, and walked out into the rest of the morning.